Welcome back to another video. How we doing today? Lots and lots to talk about as always. Commander's Quarter with my guy John J. Nice and this Wonder. How we doing today, John?
Good. How are you? Good to be back.
Always good to be back. So let's talk Sonny Styles. Welcome to DC, Sonny Styles, the most athletic freak in the entire 2026 draft. I should have known as soon as he got a 10 out of his athletic score, the raw score, I should have known that's AP's guy. I was talking myself doing mental gymnastics. Oh, I want Cornell Tate. What if Jeremiah Love drops? We could use Mansour Delane. Let's talk about that later. But welcome to DC, Sonny Styles. You are going to be linebacker one, Mike Green Dot, the one calling plays, and you're only going to get better. John, this guy has the highest ceiling. I think right now, I think Caleb Downs, and we're going to talk about more him later, but Caleb Downs is a better player right now. However, I do think Sonny Styles has Hall of Fame potential. I think Sonny Styles is going to be the better player in the long term. What do you make of this Sonny Styles pick?
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree with you. I think it was a position of need as well. We know we did not have great linebacking core last year. A lot of people made over McGee's speed and he was going to be better this year, but we don't know that for certain. And if you have a guy out there, you can't teach size and athleticism. So, with his measurables, his size, his quickness, like I said, like you said, I think he has the highest ceiling of everyone that was there at that time for that pick. And he's only got room to grow, right? He can learn from, Chanel as well from the Chiefs, who's been in a Super Bowl organization like the playing for Kansas City and Coach Andy Reid. And so, he can learn from people who have that experience of what it takes to make it all the way. And I think he's only going to get better, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely. Dude's gonna get better. I think this was the perfect fit as well in DQ's system. DQ, well, first of all, AP drafted Fred Warner in the fifth round, so AP loves an athletic Mike linebacker, and then DQ. DQ is a great defensive mind, great defensive coach. He's gonna coach up Sonny Styles, and also what I was impressed by, Sonny Styles wanted to come to Washington. It wasn't like he fell and was like, I was a top 10 pick. No, he didn't want to go to New York. Well, no one wants to be with the Jets. He didn't want to be in Arizona. He didn't want to be with Tennessee. He wanted Washington. And he manifested that. He told his family, told his parents, I'm going to Washington. And everyone thought he was going to be a top five pick with Tennessee at the very least. At the very least, that's my opinion, John. So it's great to see that the culture is so good that people actually want to be drafted to DC, actually want to sign with DC for a decent pay cut. So very happy to see that. But let's talk about draft needs. So basically, I was thinking Sonny Styles was going to go five to the Giants or four to the Titans. I was thinking we were going to draft Carnell Tate. That was my hope. That was my pick, just because we need another receiver, just to help Jaden Daniels out with a guy to get separation. Ohio State receiver. They breed their wide receiver machine, as you know. So I was surprised he went four. And then if Carnell Tate wasn't there, let's say the Browns would have picked him. I was thinking Mansour Delane. Shore up the secondary, move Mikey to like free safety and nickel and dime packages, and really just blitz six or seven, and then just have two lockdown corners on the outside. But I was very surprised they went before us and Sonny Styles fell to us. So I guess my question to you is, in this situation, Tate's gone and Delane's gone. Uh, Actually, no, you kind of answered that. I guess, John, if you had the pick at seven and you could pick anyone, who would you pick? Armchair GM.
It's a good question. I was kind of leaning Tate just because of the track record with Ohio State wide receivers. And, we have seen in the past that Jaden could take a one superstar receiving core like a Terry and take a bunch of other guys that aren't really a true number two, but with where he can put the ball and he can kind of elevate their production. So I was thinking about taking Tate. And plus, if you think this is Terry's last year, you're going to have to refill a one and a two spot, right? So you're going to be looking for, basically rebuilding your receiving core from the top down. But, linebacker was also a position of need. His athleticism was off the charts. And in terms of the interviews, right? I know it's, not everyone it does a great interview. But in terms of those guys that were drafted high, you always want to draft a guy who loves football, right? They don't love the fame and the money that comes with it. You want a guy that loves football. He's going to work hard. First guy in, last guy to leave type of mentality. And you can just tell from his interview, Sonny Styles is just a guy that he just loves the game, right? He doesn't seem like a guy that's going to let that $1 million contract kind of go to his head and stop working hard because you just want a guy that's a baller, right? They're going to work hard. They love the game. They don't love the fame and everything that comes with, being great at football. So, in terms of kind of what I've seen from his interviews, he seems like he speaks well. He seems that, he loves football and just wants to play for Dan Quinn. And he even mentioned, what I thought was interesting, that Dan Quinn was the only coach that gave him his cell phone number after those kind of pre-draft interviews and said, regardless what happens, I'm here for you. And we hear all those things about DQ being a player coach, but that gives us a concrete example to be like, we didn't think those players were lying, but here's the proof, right? This rookie's like, hey, that was the only coach that did that for me. And a guy like that was doing plenty of pre-draft interviews with a lot of those teams. So, all those little things kind of it points to the type of man that DQ is. We don't know what's going to happen after this year. The NFL, nothing is for certain, but all these things that we're hearing about Sonny, about DQ, and how he was kind of handling, his treating that rookie like that and kind of extending that, like, here's my personal cell. You can see that the action behind his words there, and you can really feel that those players do want to play for him. And it was a position of need as well. So I don't think you could have gone wrong with taking Sonny at that pick based on where we needed need and his athleticism and everything he can provide. And I do agree with you that maybe Downs is the better player right now, but I think the ceiling for Sonny Styles is so much higher, and he's only going to continue to get better playing in the system. Playing for DQ, and you have what he can't teach, which is that love for the game, passion for the game, and also his size and athleticism.
Hmm. I completely agree. And, I think people were comparing Caleb Downs to like Nick Cross, very similar box safeties. I always thought Caleb Downs was more like a center fielder, more like a guy to prevent the big plays, but it seems like he lined up a lot on the box on the line of scrimmage. So maybe there's some truth to that. Also, he fell to 11, John, which was very surprising. And his knee, maybe his knee is worse than people think, and teams are being a little quiet about that. And he dropped. He was supposed to be the best prospect in this entire class. That's what everyone was saying for years and years and years. But let's go back to Ohio State. Sonny Styles, this is his second year playing linebacker, and he only played middle linebacker because number one, Arvell Reese is there, and Arvell Reese is a dog. So I think the Ohio State, Matt Patricia would have had Sonny Styles line up, three technique, hands in the dirt, and come off the edge because he's 6'5". He jumps as high as Calvin Johnson. He's as fast as Bijan Robinson. I believe he would have been an edge rusher. So that's kind of crazy to think. And also, he wore zero, block zero. That's elite. Caleb Downs didn't even wear zero, and I know Caleb Downs was the free safety, but everyone was saying Caleb Downs is the better prospect, better player, and yet Sonny Styles wore the zero. Sonny Styles called the plays. He was the captain of that defense, calling stuff out. He was in the middle of everything. So it's just kind of surprising, John, that looking back at all the evidence, everyone's saying Caleb Downs is the better player, but it just seems like Sonny Styles has the potential, like we've always talked about. But do we think that Sonny Styles was the better prospect and better player at Ohio State?
Well, it is interesting too that, right, all three of those guys, Reese, Downs, and Sonny, all go within the NFC East. So only time's going to tell if the Giants made the right pick, getting the first pick of those three, right? If we made the better pick, Downs or Styles, and then obviously the Cowboys kind of got who was left over. So it's going to be interesting over time to see if the Giants and the Commanders made the right choices with those Ohio State defenders that coming from this class. But yeah, I mean, it's just so interesting, right? I mean, the Giants taking Reese a couple spots, ahead. It does make you wonder, why they didn't take Styles. But I mean, personally, I'm glad they didn't. Just from based on what I've seen from Reese's interviews and kind of, just my personal vibe I get. But yeah, it is interesting that, I don't know if AP and Dan Quinn thought Styles was going to drop all the way to 7. I feel like probably in their minds, he was the best of those three players on their board. So, hopefully the Giants made the right pick or made the wrong pick in terms of taking Reese, and, letting Styles drop to us. But it is interesting. I can't remember a time when you've seen a team like that where you have three defenders all getting drafted, all to the same, division, NFC East, like that, all within, 8 or so picks around the top 10 from each other, and all coming from a team that didn't even win the national championship, right? Like, all these players at Ohio State got drafted and they still didn't win the national championship in college, but that individual talent that team had, there's so much talent across the board. And it is interesting that, Styles was the one that dropped, because I do think his athleticism is the best of all three of those guys. So I think you're drafting him as more like I see the highest ceiling, and coming with us, I think playing for DQ and the system, and we really don't know what the system's going to look like entirely for the Commanders, right? With Jones coming in, I think is his name, right? The DC. So it's going to be a lot of new things. But for me personally, I think Styles to me spoke he spoke very well. He seemed like he loves football, and I think you're drafting because I do think his ceiling is the highest. And right, like I said, having those things you can't teach, having the signal call play experience, right, calling those plays, that's a void that we needed to fill, right, with Bobby Wagner, only getting older. So I mean, I think they made the right pick, but it is going to be very interesting to see over time, how all three of these guys pan out, and we're going to get to see a lot of them for good or for bad for us too. So
Good or bad. And I'd like to stick with the Commanders, John. And the other pod, I'll talk more about how that's going to fit. But let's talk about Sonny Styles' playing time. I think he's going to play the most snaps with Leo Chanel. I think Frankie Louvu is going to be the odd man out who's going to get bumped and reduce playing time, like 60% of the snaps, 70% of the snaps, just because Frankie Louvu can't cover on passing downs. And so in the base 3-4, you got three defensive tackles, Kinlaw, Payne, and Settle. You got your two outside linebackers, which are like probably Dorrance Armstrong and Odafe Owe, or maybe Kavion Chasen. And then it's Chanel and Sonny in the middle linebacker spots. So obviously Frankie's going to sub in and out. Frankie's going to play a lot, but he's not going to play as much as he did the previous 2 years, um, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if Frankie Louvu is a good 3-4 player. He's not big enough to play outside linebacker in the base 3-4, but he's also not good on passing downs to just be a middle inside linebacker in that. So it's kind of interesting to see that, and plus we have Armstrong, Chaseon, and Odafe Owe for the two outside linebacker spots. And obviously nickel and dime packages. Frankie's probably not going to be in the field, or if he is, he's going to be on the line of scrimmage rushing the passer. So my thing, John, is I'm a little worried that based off scheme fit, that Frankie's not going to be as effective as he was his first year in Washington. He's probably going to leave at the end of the year. That's my opinion. Do you see that playing out for Frankie?
yeah, I think I can see them using Frankie as more of a rush the passer. Like on passing downs, but he's gonna be the blitzer. He's gonna be rushing the passer. Because I think him coming downhill is where he's at his best. And you're right, he's kind of almost a tweener in a sense where, he's not big enough to be like hand in the dirt in the middle of like on the D line, but he's not quick enough to maybe always be that coverage linebacker and kind of drop into space and be able to hang with a running back or someone out of the backfield or a tight end. So it's kind of he's kind of like that tweener in my opinion. I'm not an X's and O's football coach, but just in terms of me just kind of watching what I see on TV, there is a place for him, and I think he adds value in terms of, and we've seen that firsthand in Washington. He can force fumbles, hits hard, right? Can kind of make those game changing plays. We didn't see it as much last year. Last year a lot of things didn't go as planned, but I think they might use him more as rushing the quarterback, coming off the edge. And I think with those other playmakers you have along the line, maybe that creates more opportunities for him as well. I don't think we had a lot of people that scared, like an OC in terms of, oh my gosh, I got to make sure I slide the line to give extra help here because this guy's going to beat my guy off the line 9 times out of 10. So I can see them using Luvu as more of a blitzer, kind of around the edge. Because you're right. I think he's kind of a tweener in terms of like a hand in the dirt D lineman, but maybe not quick enough to cover someone out of the backfield either and be in that middle linebacker kind of center of the field.
Hmm. All right, let's talk about the rest of our draft, of the Commanders draft picks. So obviously, no second round. We traded that for Laramie Tunsil. With the second round pick, the Washington Commanders select Laramie Tunsil, left tackle. So we drafted Antonio Williams. That was a position of need right off the bat. He's a Clemson guy. So Clemson, unfortunately, has underachieved as a team in the past 5, 6 years, but they always have a lot of talent, a lot of 4 or 5 star recruits they always get. I don't know a lot, but based off the tape, it seems like he's the best route runner. He can separate. He's only 5'11", and I think everyone in Washington even my dad was clamoring he wants a big body receiver like a 6'2", 6'3" guy. We do have two of those, Luke McCaffrey and Treylon Burks. I didn't know Luke McCaffrey. First of all, McCaffrey has to play an outside receiver. Just as note, he's 6'2". He should not be a slot guy. Bearing that in mind, Antonio Williams can separate. I think that's one of the main reasons we drafted him. He can separate, and even though he's only like 5'11", that's average for a receiver in the NFL. Malik Neighbors is 5'11 and a half, 6 feet in that range. So yes, you want like a Calvin Johnson, Julio Jones, but if we didn't, but Cornell Tate was off the board at that point, and you're not going to reach for Jordan Tyson at 7. So Antonio Williams seems like a good guy. He can play slot and outside, so we can move him around anywhere, which I like. And plus, it was a position of need. We needed a receiver. We could not wait for Brandon Ayuk to be cut. Are we going to rely on Treylon Burks? Are we going to keep hoping and waiting for Luke McCaffrey and Jalen Lane to develop their route running? Let's get the best route runner. So it's pretty hard just because I don't know that deep of the draft class, but I trust AP. I trust Blau's insight too. So did you like the pick?
I did. I thought they were going to go with a bigger body receiver as well. But yeah, I think he runs. He's a good route runner, and I heard comparisons that maybe he could be, a younger Jamison Crowder. He had a good year for us 2 years ago, playing that slot receiver spot. Um, and yeah, I think definitely a position of need, right? We didn't really have a true slot receiver, but basically a true 2 or 3 receiver coming into this year. So there's a lot of opportunities, and if you're going to take a third round pick, I saw some kind of criticisms that it's like you have McCaffrey, you have Jalen Lane, and now you've got this guy, and it's like all three are very similar in terms of they can be a kick return guy, maybe they can play slot receiver, but you have a lot of unproven guys in that receiver room. Obviously, bringing Dami back, Van Jefferson, you're bringing in some vets as well that have proven they can have roles on teams, and we saw Dami have success with Jaden and have a good rapport before. But yeah, we didn't have a true slot receiver. So, and once again, right, if you're thinking this could be the last year of Terry, you want to shore up a number 3 kind of slot receiver spot. So then hopefully that's your slot guy for the future. I am curious if, when push comes to shove with the roster, what receiver kind of gets, booted out of that room. I think we have 7 now, maybe with added
Mhm.
Jefferson and
We
Dami
have
Brown
7.
and now drafting a receiver. So it does make you wonder, if they're going to end up cutting one of those guys after camp, like, or it's like, hey, our guy, we drafted McCaffrey, Lane, and Williams, so these are our guys, and maybe you see like a Van Jefferson if he doesn't perform well, get cut after camp or something, because we saw that with Michael Gallup when Dan Quinn came in and signed Michael Gallup. He was successful in Dallas with him, and then didn't make it through camp to the 53. So, and you needed receivers. You definitely needed to get younger there. I really like the Burks re-signing because we saw what he could do. Give a guy who never really panned out at another high draft pick, didn't really pan out for his first team. Comes here, has the highlight catch. I think he can be serviceable as well. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of surprising. I wasn't expecting to go with a slot receiver. I was thinking that more big body, maybe a number 2 receiver. You think, but we've seen shorter receivers in the league be successful. Not to say that even Terry himself isn't the biggest guy, but he runs routes well. I know last year he had some injuries, so maybe that's why he slipped because recency bias. And 2 years ago for Clemson, he had like 11 touchdowns, I think, and he only had 4 last year. But I think he only played maybe 5 or 6 games with his injuries, so he was effective in a short amount of time. And if he can stay healthy, develop that rapport with Jaden, Jaden stays healthy, then I think you drafted a guy that you hope eventually can turn into your slot receiver for on his rookie deal.
Yeah, I think Van Jefferson's the guy who's going to get cut at the end of the day. Plus, I mean, we can't rely on Ayuk, getting cut. We just don't know. And we're not going to trade for him, right? And no one's going to trade for him at this point because of his contract. So, Van Jefferson's the odd man out. We should bring 6. I'm not in favor of cutting McCaffrey and Lane. They're dynamic guys when they get the ball in the open field. You see that on the returns. Lane, 2 punt return touchdowns. McCaffrey, explosive when he has space to operate. They just need to be better route runners and to just I think Lane has stone hands from what I saw at least, or it can't get open.
Mm-hmm.
They just need to work on their route running. I still believe in them, even though it was 2 disappointing-ish years for McCaffrey, but McCaffrey's 6'2" and fast. So keep look at Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce wasn't that good. I know McCaffrey's not as good as Pierce, but Pierce is developing. and he only had 1,000 yards one time, and now he got the bag. What I'm saying is, give him time. He has intangibles. The rest of the picks, we drafted a center. We drafted. Let's talk about the quarterback pick. Were you surprised about that seventh round quarterback pick? That guy out of Arkansas instead of getting Garrett Nussmeier from LSU.
Yeah, I thought he might have played at Rutgers. Z, I'm not
Oh,
sure. I could be
Rutgers.
wrong.
My bad. My bad.
No, another red maroon school. It's all good. But no, I think I was surprised. Don't worry, there's no QB competition. We don't have to worry about that anymore here. But I actually was listening to Scott Turner, the old OC, was on the radio. I think yesterday with the Grant and Danny show, 106.7, and he was saying that you probably draft a seventh round quarterback like that, hoping that you can get a cheap guy that can eventually develop into your number two quarterback, right? Because if Jaden, you're gonna have to pay Jaden after the rookie deal is up, and if you can have a quarterback that you can keep on the cheap to be your number two quarterback, you're not gonna be able to keep paying 5 to 10 million a guy for a number two quarterback behind Jaden when you got to give him the bag. So it's kind of one of those things where like they must have liked what they seen. Add another arm for training camp. Obviously, Josh Johnson is not with us anymore. He's with the Bengals now, I believe, but which is crazy, and it's a whole nother story. But you need another arm in camp. You always need those guys to throw the ball in camp, and maybe over time he develops into that number two quarterback behind Jaden. Mariota's only getting older. Who knows? Or Mariota, right? He's only getting older. So we don't know how many more years he has either. So, if you think this guy can eventually develop into your number two quarterback when you got to pay Jaden a couple years, he's been in your system, he's been in the room with those guys. But I didn't even I know the draft analysts. I didn't even hear anyone say like they said he just has average arm talent. He just has a bunch of reps. I think he started for Minnesota, transferred to Rutgers. So we've seen those quarterbacks that have the reps in college. It always seems to help with just getting that experience, right? Quarterback there's so many nuances to that position and timing, and you can't simulate those in-game reps, and he has that. We've seen that at the pro level with guys like Anthony Richardson. Only had that one real year in college where he started and hasn't really panned out. I know there's been injuries and other factors, but from what we've seen with Herbert and Bo Nix and these guys that have gotten reps in college, and I'm not saying this guy is anywhere near that talent level, but just to say that he has the experience, right? He started for multiple schools in the Big Ten. We know the Big Ten's a strong football conference. But yeah, the pick was surprising. I didn't even hear he had like elite arm talent. It's kind of just average arm. And you're also wondering, like, you probably could have just gotten that guy as one of those UDFAs, right?
Mhm.
So it was interesting to spend a pick on him when there's other needs and other picks. I feel like other guys available they could have taken at that spot. You probably just could have signed him as a UDFA to come into camp and be another arm, but they must like what they see or think that he has potential to maybe work into being that number two or three quarterback for the future.
Yeah, it's interesting because Mariota might leave because he's only getting 1 year deals. He might want to be QB1 for someone. Maybe a team gets desperate and trades for Mariota at the trade deadline, gives up like me a third, fourth round pick for a Mariota. And then Sam Hartman sucks. I'm sorry. He's terrible. Just go into modeling and acting, Sam Hartman. If you're probably not watching or listening to this, but dude, you're just a model. Like you could work and make so much money as an actor or model right now. It's actually insane because you're good. He's a good-looking guy. Every girlfriend and wife and wag knows about him. If you're a Commanders fan, your wife or girlfriend knows who Sam Hartman is. Probably the second most popular player, obviously behind Jaden and maybe Terry. But Sam Hartman's terrible. You can just see it. And Mariota, he's the best backup in the league, but he probably wants to get paid more. And given the right situation, he's gonna leave.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of liked it. I didn't like it in the moment. I was like, what the fuck is this guy? Like, seriously? But if he can develop into be a QB, a solid QB2, it's good. I would have preferred Nussmeier. How poetic and Shakespeare to draft Nussmeier, the QB2 at LSU behind Jaden, and then QB2 again for the Commanders. How funny would that be? That was my pick, but it's okay. I guess they like that guy. Got to trust AP and DQ with these things. I'm just an armchair GM. All right, since we have some time, is there anything Commanders related you want to talk about quickly? I'm kind of out.
I was gonna just touch on the center that we drafted. I
Center.
was listening to Scott Turner again, and he brought up some good points about he doesn't see him as like a day one kind of week one come in and ready to start and contribute, but he did play both guard positions as well in college. So he's got experience along all of those interior line positions. And that's something that you can't, you can't teach that experience, right? So I believe he started for another school at both guard spots, transferred to Michigan State, started center for them last year. So, you're hoping drafting a guy like that, he gives you position flexibility, which we know DQ and AP seem to like those guys that can play multiple positions. And, he can be a number two left guard, right guard, center. So, and, you're hoping maybe even your center of the future if, Allegretti's only getting older as well. So, taking, obviously we know center was position of need. They tried to get Linderbaum in free agency, obviously re-sign Allegretti. But, I'm okay with that pick as well. Just, I thought that was a good pick just because, maybe he can push Allegretti, see what he does in camp. I think Allegretti's probably still your day one center at this point. I don't see them bringing in anyone else this late in the game with that. But, if you're going to draft a guy, a center, like let's draft a guy who can maybe push Allegretti, come in and start if he had to. Comes from the Big Ten once again, which is a big football conference, and you're playing against NFL talent almost every week in that conference once you get into conference play. So I think having that position flexibility along the interior of the line makes that a pretty solid fifth round pick too.
Yeah, that was also a position of need because Allegretti's never played center, maybe a little bit in training camp. So it's going to be interesting. And obviously, everyone did not like the Bianish, cutting Bianish. I still don't get it, but you got to trust the process. You got to trust that they saw something that they didn't like. Maybe he really didn't fit Blau's system, like truly. But it was also a position of need, and a guy who's played a lot, especially at a place like Michigan State, you trust them. Even if he was what was he, fifth or sixth, late round, day three pick. But those guys are still elite. You got to think, John, only 200 out of thousands of D1 college athletes are drafted. And even the guys in day three, they're still elite. They're still starters. Maybe not all Americans, but still like all conference
Mm-hmm.
captains, guys who played multiple years, 2, 3, maybe 4 years at elite schools. So you gotta trust the process. And this is not like the Ricky Stromberg pick where that dude was such a reach. Oh my God, bro. Or Keith Ismail. Oh, Ron Rivera, you're
I
killing
forgot about
me.
them. Yeah. Wow.
You're killing me, Ron.
Yeah.
AP. And let's look at AP's. When AP was with San Francisco, his late round picks always hit. Fred Warner, Kittle, Purdy. Am I missing anyone? Um, those are the main guys. But
Mhm.
anyway, ever since AP left San Francisco, John Lynch's drafts have not looked good. So it bears the question, you think AP was really the brains behind the operation in San Fran?
It certainly seems that way, based on recent history. I mean, obviously we could be a little bit biased, but the proof is in the picks, right? So, it really does seem like he was probably, the brains behind that operation in San Fran. And even, we can touch on the running back too that we drafted from Penn State. I forget the statistical categories, but there was like three different marks where only him and Jeremiah Love were like the only two running backs, excuse me, in all of D1 last year to like hit these three marks. And obviously being in company with Jeremiah Love, that's pretty good, right? To be in only those two running backs. It was like three different metrics, like rushing for I think maybe like 1,100 yards or 6.5 yards per catch, or like there were all these, like there were three metrics, and it was like only those two running backs in all of college football hit those three. So that's good company to be a part of. And another thing Scott Turner was saying yesterday was this Penn State running back graded really high on pass blocking, protection scheme. So, I think he fills the Chris Rodriguez role in terms of being a physical, bigger body running back. Not going to give you those explosive plays, but can hit the pile and get you to fall forward for 2 or 3 more yards than what you were expecting.
Hmm.
And for him to see the field, I think if he can be a good pass blocking, running back in terms of picking up the blitzer, protecting the quarterback like that. That could be a way for him to see the field. Obviously, he'd probably be on special teams as well. But it is another crowded room too, right? With five running backs, you wonder who's that odd man out. You're probably not going to take five. You're not going to take five to the 53 roster. So, in my opinion, it's probably going to be like a McNichols or a Ford that it probably is the odd man out, and they're just going to see what happens in camp, bringing in those veterans. But at the end of the day, it's like we got Bill late in the draft as well. We've seen he has the explosive capabilities. You take a flyer on this Penn State running back. He's the all-time leading rusher in Penn State history. Obviously, Saquon Barkley. I don't think he stayed all 4 of his years. So, you could look at the stats. It can be misleading or whatever, but, he graded high in pass blocking. It's never a bad idea to have too many running backs. Like I said, we don't really have maybe a true RB1. It's more of a running back by committee. So throw another running back in the room and see what he can produce on a cheap rookie deal late in the draft.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. Hey, let's talk about the defensive end we drafted. Jo, jo, I'm sorry, I'm botching it right now. Oh my gosh.
Josephs or yeah, I know who
Yeah,
you're talking about.
Joshua Josephs. Interesting name. Anyway, the dude got drafted. He came from Tennessee. Tennessee's a great school, but he didn't look enthusiastic. John, do you think he expected to be drafted higher and he was disappointed by being drafted in the fifth round? I don't think it's because he was drafted to the Commanders. I think it's the former. Like, what
Yeah,
do you
no,
think?
I would agree. I saw the same video too, and people are like, "Oh, he didn't want to go to DC, didn't want to go to the Commanders." I mean, he's going to get to learn from some really great veterans in that room, right? We got tons of studs now that we paid along the D line and OA and Chason, Payne, like Kinlaw. He's going to get to learn from so many of those, veterans. Obviously, hopefully, he has that attitude and that mindset that he wants to go in there and learn from those guys that have been in the league and doing it for a while and been successful. But I do think it was more of the just that he slipped himself in the draft. I don't think it was getting drafted to the Commanders because we've seen free agents and people now want to come to DC and be excited to come to DC. So that stigma is kind of left with the Dan Snyder regime and era kind of ending. So I do think he was just more disappointed in terms of his own kind of slip in the draft. I know Johnny Newton kind of had a similar, like, felt slighted. He dropped to the second round, and but I do think those guys are obviously they're disappointed, but with where they went. But I think that also gives them a chip on their shoulder to prove, um, you know, that they feel in, the late great Dwayne Haskins, right? The league done messed up. So we hope that Josephs takes that mentality in terms of I'm going to prove all those other teams that passed on me multiple times wrong. And I think he's upset just in terms of where he got picked. But I do agree with you that, the Commanders have gotten rid of that stigma of no one wants to come to DC. So I do think it's probably just where he went was why he was kind of upset there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. He better not be disappointed coming to DC because, bro, we're on the come up. I'm telling people, man. Von Miller was just on stream with Neon of all people. Um, Anyway, Von Miller was like, I had two contracts, Seattle and Washington. He was like, it came down to quarterback, and he believed in Jaden Daniels over Sam Darnold. And obviously, after the rookie year, you do take Jaden Daniels over Sam Darnold. It just goes to show that like people are really sleeping on Jaden, man. The media, I got Jay and Joey telling me, oh, the Commanders might need to consider drafting another quarterback as Jaden's replacement. I'm like, you guys are fucking tripping, bro. The Bengals have had Joe Burrow in injury play most of his career, or at least half. The Bengals are not trying to replace Joe Burrow. The Commanders are not trying to replace Jaden Daniels. What is this stigma, bro? Ridiculous. Jaden Daniels will be back. And someone like Colin Cowherd was projecting Francis Mauiana, the tackle from Miami, to Washington because he said Jaden Daniels is injury prone. So therefore, the O line must be bad. If you actually had some nuance and context, you would see that the reason why Daniels got injured, hip drop tackles, and the receivers couldn't get open and separate. So Jaden had to play Superman. And unfortunately, Jaden is not built like Superman, so he can't be Superman every play or take those hits. Like, he's not built like Josh Allen. So it's a combination of receivers not getting open, combination of Jaden playing hero ball too much, and taking the hits. So it's like people are just dumb. They just don't know Washington football. And I just want to prove people wrong, John. I just want people to shut the fuck up and say, we got the best quarterback in the NFC East, in the division, maybe the all of NFC. Maybe we don't have the most talented team yet, but we're on the come up.
Yeah, no, it's a recency bias, right? Like 2 years ago, everyone was clamoring over Jaden Daniels and oh my God, rookie of the year, best season we've ever seen. And then as we see in the NFL, right, every year is different. Burrow's had those years too, right, where he's had these injuries and not played that much. And it's just so recency bias, right? Like we've seen what Jaden can do when healthy. And a lot of those injuries, like you said, hip drop tackles, there's no one open. He's holding onto the ball too long. And then he's trying to play hero ball and taking hits, unnecessary hits. And then like the elbow injury, that's just a freak injury, right? I mean, that's like I'm trying to think of like a freak like Kevin Ware or like a Paul George. Right, we've seen these freak like injuries that just you step wrong and it goes right, or you land wrong and something happens. So, some of those things are freak plays that aren't going to happen, year after year. Knock on wood, but I don't. I think those lingering guys that have those lingering hamstring injuries, or it's like we've seen that with Mike Evans or Julio Jones. They've had these seasons where it's like that hamstring injury just keeps nagging. You think they're back, and then they're out another 2 or 3 weeks because they re-aggravate it. So, I think those injuries are more worrisome in terms of like you just can't seem to recover and get over it. But from everything I've seen, his injuries were some that like it happens, you're able to get that full recovery, and it's not going to be that nagging injury where the whole season he's kind of it's bothering him week after week. And we even saw right there the rookie year those broken ribs, and he played through that for most of it, right? And he still produced it at that high level and got us to the championship game. So, if you give him a good, good weapons, good protection, a good scheme around him, I think Blau is going to put in a lot of the, stuff they ran in Detroit. And obviously we know Jaden is much better athlete than Goff. And I think he's, maybe even more talented in Goff, just benefited from having a better core around him. And, we went into Detroit and beat Detroit when they were, number one seed, and everyone thought that was going to be their year to go all the way. So, we've seen Jaden have success even playing through some injuries. And I think with, a full offseason going into training camp healthy with McLaurin and everybody else, I think can only go up from here. And, we've seen what he can produce in his rookie year, and he's only going to continue to get better.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm just tired of the stigma. Oh, Jalen Hurts, top five quarterback. I'm talking to you, Jay, if you're listening or watching. We have the most talented quarterback. We have the best quarterback because, first of all, you don't think McVay, Shanahan, Ben Johnson would trade for Jaden Daniels right now? I think Ben Johnson would trade Caleb for Jaden Daniels straight up right now, based off what I've seen. I truly believe that. I believe McVay would, maybe not now, next year, he would trade a haul for Jaden. Shanahan, too. You trade Purdy and a haul for Jaden. I think all these offensive coaches would, except Reed and Mahomes. It's just like people forget, man, and think like, oh, he's injury prone, and everyone kept telling me, oh, sophomore slump coming, sophomore slump. Sophomore slumps are a myth, really. I mean, Mahomes was technically at a sophomore slump, and he won the Super Bowl. What kind of sophomores? If you're not elite, you have a sophomore slump. And the reason why Jaden wasn't productive was just because injuries. And you know what? The dude had one freak injury. He's fine. Anyway, thank you guys for watching so much. Like, comment, subscribe. What you talk about next? I'm Z Shaw.
I'm Jay Nice.
And stay clocked out. Deuces, everyone.